we have lots of information out there to put in early successional habitat. And what I did about 6 months ago, since quail have been elevated in my life for the last year or so, I started growing the beard here and trying to maintain it in early successional habitat as a reminder of how difficult it is. And you've got to tend to this every couple of days. Much like the landowner or the steward of the land, he has to tend to that wildlife habitat every couple of years. If you let it go, it gets out of that phase that it's beneficial to the wildlife in, it gets into that mid-successional, and then soon it starts becoming a young forest, and then you lose all the benefits of that particular habitat. And so the hardest thing, we can tell people what needs to be done. The biggest thing is the maintenance of that habitat. So people could put it in pretty quickly within a year or two, but they can't just let it go. As soon as they walk away, they lost it. And so it's something that has to be maintained. And so that's the hardest thing to do. We can teach them what to do, but getting them to keep up with it is our biggest challenge, I believe.
Anybody from the audience? You like to say? Correct.
I don't know if is this on?
Yes.
Are we recording? I'd like to comment briefly on what Darrell mentioned. The notion of having these focal areas for bobwhites is absolutely essential. I've worked with a bunch of researchers from Oklahoma, Texas, Georgia, North Carolina, other places that have gone this focal route, and they've been quite successful in increasing bobwhite populations on those focal areas. And as Darrell mentioned, being able to take your resources and concentrate them in these areas that are more likely to benefit bobwhites only makes sense, as opposed to the shotgun approach. And what Darrell mentioned in terms of the acreage necessary is quite accurate. One question I had was, in the landowner participation, is that going to be within some regional focal area as you showed on the map, or is that statewide, or how will that be done?
None of this has been fleshed out, but what the latest rationale is, where those anchor areas are, that's where we'll try to have our private land biologists focus most of their work. But the wildlife stewardship program would be available. The more habitat we put in that the landowners are willing to do it at no cost, we don't care where they do it, if they're going to do it on their property and just follow our advice. But the idea is to focus the efforts not just on that anchor WMA, but direct the private land biologists to really focus on getting more and more land added to that anchor area. Thank you, Commissioner. Oh.
This, and I think this could be a good program, anything you do to incentivize landowners. It sounds like the old DMAP program that we had tried to get a ranching for wildlife or whatever, but, and I don't want to be skeptical at all, but the Wolf River WMA has been managed for 15 years for quail. Ames Plantation is 18,000 acres specifically managed for quail. I know where there's 200 acres down there in Fayette County that had 8 or 10 coveys of birds on it up until about 1985. Nothing changed. Nothing changed. And the quail went away. So how do we expect this to, while I think it's a great program and you can try anything and it's good for deer and turkeys and all, what gives you the expectation that doing this is going to do any good when you've had all these other test cases in huge acreages that have failed or had limited success?
That is something we don't know. We'd like to believe it's going to work, but there are issues. This quail problem that is seen across the country, there are so many different ideas. In fact, I believe the plenary session at the Southeastern Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies had someone up there from Texas talking about quail, and eyeworms were the cause for the decline. There still needs to be a lot of research done on the impact of diseases, on the impact of predation, on the impact of harvest, on the impact of so many different things that may potentially be an underlying reason of why we don't have quail. I wish we could say habitat is the only reason, but we do know it's the most important reason. There may be some other things going on, and I wish I had a good answer for your question, Commissioner. Did you? Thank you.
If I could, it's just, this is something we work with in a big way in a number of states. And there is so much confusion surrounding this issue. You brought up Ames Plantation, for example. Number one, Ames Plantation is not managed for quail. They have field trial courses for the field trial on Ames, but even those, it can easily be argued, are not managed for quail because half of those field trial courses are mowed multiple times each year. Plus, back in 2002, I believe it was, Ames went to a release bird situation. And so now Ames Plantation releases thousands of birds just prior to the national field trial. The reason we found was because the dogs simply were not finding the birds. Mississippi State came in and implemented a program on Ames Plantation in 98, 99, 2000, and 01, I believe it was, and they transformed several thousand acres from forest, which is not habitat for bobwhites, to early succession. On those areas, they monitored and found that the birds increased to a bird per acre. But even with that, the bird dogs were not finding the birds. And out of sheer frustration, some of the ones with the bird dogs said, we're not coming back if you don't start releasing birds. Well, they took the grand champion dog to these areas where they knew there were birds because they had them, radio telemetered coveys. Set the grand champion dog out. They went through one field, didn't find any of the birds. They said the covey is right down there in the corner. Went down there into that area, the dog ran right past them. The guy was frustrated. They went down there and flushed the covey. Long story short, they did that 3 times. The grand national champion dog did not find any of the birds. The majority of these dogs nowadays, obviously, are trained on pen-raised birds. And they are simply using different areas than wild birds do, which is very thick cover. And something we're involved in right now in Kentucky is we're going to be looking at the ability of dogs to find wild birds versus pen-raised birds on the Peabody Refuge up there in western Kentucky, which will be interesting to see how these bird dogs react to pen-raised birds versus being able to find wild birds. In West Tennessee, we had several properties where they were putting in field buffers around soybean fields. On those properties, the bobwhite population increased 300% within 4 years after that. It was largely a matter of increasing the amount of usable space for the birds. And what people do not realize is that closed canopied woods, tall fescue and Bermuda grass pasture and hay fields, and clean cropped crop fields are simply not habitat. There is no cover there. So by having those field borders come in, there is cover there, especially during the wintertime, and the birds are able to use the nutrition from the crop fields, yet find nesting and escape cover during the wintertime. So I would argue we have lots of data to show that these habitat management practices can work. But even with those landowners that are implementing it, they get this, it's right back here. Most of us have a European ancestry, and we have this notion that it has to be clean, green, and even. So even after we give them this money, this incentive to put in this habitat, and they have what is developing into nice cover, they go out there with a tractor and a bush hog and they mow it down annually because it's looking snaky. They don't like this appearance. And so it's up to us to continue to educate these people on what exactly cover is and when the birds need it. It's a huge problem, but it's not, fire ants and aflatoxins in corn. It's got to do with our land management practices and how we conceptualize different cover. Most landowners think it looks very nasty and are worried about what the neighbors think.
Doctor, I guess the one thing I'm also hearing, I'm hearing 2 things. One is there needs to be an education on cover, and hopefully we can set the example, if you will, in some of these wildlife management areas. In fact, I think they already are setting the example. But, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but there's also this 800-pound elephant in the room that I'm sensing that even with the cover, even with the habitat, our hope and our prayers that that works, but that there may be something else at work that's fighting against us as well that we don't even know right now, whether it's the worm issue or whatnot. Is that a fair representation?
I think the 800-pound elephant is what Darrell explained as scale. When people go out there and they put all of their energy, all of their money, because they have passion for hunting quail, and they do this on their property, they're doing everything they can, everything the biologist and whoever else is recommending, and they see no response. In the lion's share of cases, this is because what's going on around them is not at all conducive to bobwhites. Right now, we've had right at 1,500 bobwhites radio collared in the last 4 years. And what we're finding is they will typically move 1 to 2 miles in the spring during their dispersal period. If you don't have localized quail populations around so this dispersal can help birds move genetics around, you'll see stagnation. Just as Darrell mentioned, if you don't have, this, 1 to 2,000 acre area, and there's nothing magic about that, but on average, that's what we're seeing. Just think about it. Quail are not woods birds. If you're on the Cumberland Plateau and there's up on the northern end, especially where there's lots of woods, I would argue, forget about it. It is not worth the efforts to try and restore quail in an area where, probably until Gabriel blows his horn, we're not going to see early succession across the landscape anymore because people simply are not making a living off of scratching the dirt like they used to. But if you go into those areas where they are, some areas of southeast and southwest Tennessee and northwest Tennessee and some other more localized spots, and it doesn't have to be a huge region, but some area in a couple county area or whatever, there's no doubt that we can manage for increased number of birds. Now, another thing I would argue is we won't ever see the 1980 populations that they're arguing for in the NBCI plan. And so having quail on your property is one thing. Having huntable numbers that most people would find, satisfactory is another matter. But the scale is the big issue.
Darrell or Rob or Alan, how is this plan different from the way Wolf River WMA is managed now? I'm sure you probably, it's 7,000 acres, 4,000 or 5,000 upland. Is it been managed in the way you're talking about managing?
That individual WMA wouldn't be managed differently than the old plan. We scaled back the old plan because that price tag and the fact that a lot of the folks believe we're spreading ourselves too thin. So we really got to bring it in and focus. If Wolf River, I'm not sure if we've identified the individual WMAs within the region, but Wolf River, I'm not sure, would that be one of the Region 1 WMAs that you would recommend?
But it's been managed for quail ever since the state bought it. So I just wonder what would change or why, what would it, and I understand what the doctor said about Ames. I would argue that they tried to manage for quail and were unsuccessful. So,
in Region 1, I'd say Wolf River is probably managed more for quail than any other WMA we have. We no longer have a farmer out there. All of the fields that used to be in row crop or early successional, they're burned, bush hog, mowed, whatever, on a rotational system. We do have some increased in quail populations, but nothing like Craig said. You're not going to see the populations of the 60s and the 70s or even the 80s, and I don't know what the problem is, whether it's eyeworms or diseases introduced by pen-reared birds, who knows? We've done everything I think we can on Wolf River, and it's helped some, but Daryl's realistic expectations, I cannot foresee us having tremendous increases in quail populations. But the one thing, and I probably should just keep my mouth shut, but one thing I do like about his plan, one of the things that seemed irritating over the years of watching quail decline is, like Daryl said, millions of dollars have been tossed at them, and this plan, to no effect, or very little effect. This plan, if Daryl pulls this off, gets away from throwing dollars at it. Here's the incentive, go do this good stuff, and if it helps, great, but it tries to steer away from just throwing more money down a rat hole.
Agreed. I think it's great. I mean, I think I'll try it. It's not a quail plan, because I don't think, it's not going, may or may not work.
I agree.
I appreciate your presentation. I think we'd all agree if we can create ways to incentivize landowners to create and maintain some early successional habitat, ways that are financially, can financially support many years and not just a period of time, because the labor that it takes to maintain that habitat is immense, and the cost is immense in some places, but it's a way that we can incentivize it, and we end up helping the quail and a lot of other animals. And I'm all for it. I'm all for looking into trying to increase the quality of our deer hunting. We have exceptional opportunities in this state, but when you're managing for wildlife, you're always either getting better or you're getting worse. I think you're not staying the same. So we're in good shape. I think we have great opportunities, but we can always look, research, and hope to increase the quality of our hunting. So thank you. I think we're headed in the right direction.
Thank you.
Thanks, Daryl. Scott Dykes, Wildlife Biologist, Region 4.
Thank you, Commissioner Teague. There's absolutely no pressure on me now, any whatsoever, to show you good quail habitat on a WMA. So somebody made that remark back there, and I'm like, yeah, no kidding. So, but I do want to share with you just a few things and show you some things that we are doing at Buffalo Springs WMA, and I think it is a good segue into everything that we've been talking about to look at this. And just to start with, just to give you an idea of where Buffalo Springs WMA is located, if you look at the orange rectangle there, just where it falls within the administrative Region 4 here in Granger County. This is an overview, just how the land lays, and we're going to look at some other pictures, some historic pictures and things like that here in just a minute. But the breakdown of the WMA, all this information is important to think about here in a minute when we get more into the management of the WMA. But roughly, the WMA is broken into about 20 acres of dove fields, 40 acres of early successional habitat, like we've been talking about, 5 acres in food plots, 30 acres in odd areas. Odd areas are areas that either we mow or areas around our maintenance buildings, roads, things like that. So that comprises about 30 acres. And then we have right at 247 acres of forested habitat. And of course, the landscape wasn't always like that here at Buffalo Springs, and we're going to talk more about that in just a second as well. If you go to the WMA, here's some of the different habitat types you can walk out at different places and see. There's more than this, but these are a few pictures that I put on there for you to take a look at. And there's a lot of pictures in this presentation, by the way, so I am capable of full sentences and graphs and things, but I decided to go with pictures because I think pictures are truly, you know, one picture worth 1,000 words kind of thought. So that's. It's not because you think we don't understand it. No, it has nothing to. Yeah, that's right. These are wild. No, I'm just kidding. All right. It's very important in understanding, I think, what's going on at Buffalo Springs, that we go back and look at the history of Buffalo Springs and what it was historically before it was a wildlife management area. To do this, you have to go back to the early 1930s, 1933. Of course, America was in Great Depression, and when President Roosevelt took office, one of the big things that he wanted to do in order to turn the economy around was, or I should say, one thing or two things he saw as a problem with what was going on in the country, that there were two things that were really being underutilized or not being used to its full potential. One was our natural resources was being abused and underused, and then or abused in some cases, and then the work using our young men, ages, as he described it, ages 17 to 25, and using that good, strong backs that they had. The truth of the matter was that more than 25% of the Americans were out of a job with the population, so there were no jobs, nothing for them to do. So, of course, he came in with what he referred to as the New Deal, and within that created the Civilian Conservation Corps. And the Civilian Conservation Corps is critical in the history of Buffalo Springs, is what I'm trying to get up to here with that. So he created the Civilian Conservation Corps. These young men were hired in to come do a lot of different types of work, different things on dealing with conservation. And they were paid a wage of $30 a month. And in order to stimulate the economy, of course, they had to send $25 of that back home, and they could put $5 in their pocket to do whatever they saw fit with. And of course, that program was seen as one of the turning points of the Great Depression. So, but I said all that to say this. Buffalo Springs was one of the projects that was created in 1935, actually, because of the what was done with President Roosevelt and the Civilian Conservation Corps. Right up here is actually this is the actual barracks area where, on the property where the men who worked there were 200 men that lived on the property that took care of what was referred to as the game farm. And historically, there was a lot of animals that were that came out off of Buffalo Springs. Down at the bottom, these are actual photographs from roughly 1939, the best I could find, that show some of the animals that were raised on Buffalo Springs at the game farm. And of course, on the far left is the northern bobwhite. It's really interesting. In 1938, more than 20,000 quail were raised at Buffalo Springs Game Farm. These birds were raised up to a certain age, boxed up, and we'll talk more about that in a second. And then they were taken all across the state. Everything that I could find and read about, they were taken to every county in Tennessee, and they were released off of Buffalo Springs Game Farm. Same for turkeys. In 1938, 2,500 wild turkeys were pen raised here, and then taken out across Tennessee and released. Here's a shot of the area where the men lived, and we'll talk more about this area in just a minute. It no longer looks like that, but we'll look at it in just a second. Here's a picture of, this is the incubator room. There were laying pens located out in the back fields, and when the adult birds that were in those pens laid the eggs, they would go gather the eggs up, bring them in, put them in the incubators, and hatch the young. Once the young hatched, they would take them to what were referred to as brooder wings. These brooder wings, there were 5 of them, and this is what made and gave Buffalo Springs its title as the largest game farm of its kind in the nation. And they could produce these massive numbers of quail and other birds. So once the birds were up to a certain age, they could then be taken outside, put in other pens, and it was just a constant. These were temperature controlled, so they could keep the young in here at all times and keep birds moving all the time. This is how they got across the state. I really wouldn't want to leave Buffalo Springs and Granger County right now and drive to Jackson in that, really, with all those birds on there, but that's what they did. And they didn't have the interstates we have either, I'm sure. So, but anyway, you notice, another Lode Upland Game, Buffalo Springs Game Farm, Rutledge, owned and operated by the Tennessee Division of Game and Fish. So really a lot of neat photos out there of Buffalo Springs and the history of it. So if you were a local, you could just show up over at Buffalo Springs. You can see the laying pens in the background where the adult birds were. We find some of these down in the woods from time to time. It's really neat. And you could just come over and pick you up a box of quail and take them over and dump them out on your farm. Well, there's a lot of neat structures on Buffalo Springs. One of them that remains standing, a lot of the buildings have fallen down or were bulldozed down. And this house was actually slated to be bulldozed down as well. And we put in a request to actually use this house as a field workstation, a lab, if you will. And we're given permission to do that. There's really nothing wrong with the house. It's just one of those buildings, whether it was a safety concern or whatever, a former regional manager decided to bulldoze it, and we did our best to try to save it. So we got that pulled off. So it's really a neat. Here it is in 1939, the day it was finished. And then through the years, of course, things changed. It was actually the regional office for Region 4 for a few years in the 1970s. So there's some pictures of the staff standing in front of this house. Excuse me. And of course, this is a picture that I took last week of what the house looks like today. So not a lot of change. There was some office space added on to the back and things like that. So looking at the landscape, we were talking about how succession takes place over time, and here's a really good example. Look at the landscape there. Of course, you've got 200 plus people on this place working it and doing different things. And then come forward to 2013, and you can really see a big difference in how things have come in. Buffalo Springs falls into a category of what we call our miscellaneous WMAs. It's a satellite WMA, if you will. It's not a huge WMA. It's not like North Cumberland that's, hundreds of thousands of acres. But what that means is that this WMA and other small WMAs with it, they share a budget, they share the manpower, they share the equipment. So you have to prioritize, do what you can do when you can do it, and go out and tackle it. So over time, of course, lacking the time or lacking funding or lacking whatever it was over the years, you start losing some of those early successional areas simply because you don't have time to go in there and get it open back up. And that's sort of where I came in to the picture. One thing that I noticed, I have a lot of passion for Buffalo Springs, really enjoy working over there, but I really saw it as an opportunity to go in and do some work primarily for early successional species. My graduate work background was working with grassland birds and doing things like that. So I really, when I'm looking at this, it just seemed like a really good place that we could use to educate the public and give them a place that they could go, because it's my opinion and the opinion of a lot of other people I've talked to that I work with, that our WMA should be the premier places, the best wildlife habitat out there. If somebody wants to see good wildlife habitat, they should come to our WMAs to see it. So with that thought, we started doing some different projects on Buffalo Springs WMA. Here's just an example. This is just a small section of one of the fields that I've taken pictures of through time, just to give you an idea of how things change. This was an area that historically was a fescue hayfield, is pretty much all it was. And once it was let go, and there's more to it than this, but once that field was let go, of course, the woody vegetation started coming in and it started growing up. So in areas like this, what we did was came in and just took a small dozer, pushed back some of the woody vegetation, and then bush hogged it, and we let that fescue really gave it the opportunity to grow, and we encouraged it to grow. So what we wanted it to do was grow, because we come in there in the fall and we sprayed it. And just to save time, I've not included, there's several years of spraying and watching what comes back, and then spraying again, and, you know, taking care of problems. But ultimately, when you get your spraying done, you get everything killed, and you get it the way you want it, you get your burning done. We went in, we didn't have the grass composition that we wanted, and so we did drill a very small amount, about 3 pounds to the acre of little blue stem, into this mix, or into the field after burning it. And we wanted to try something a little different. One thing that we hear constantly in being on the staff at the office and talking to people on the phone, we talk to people and they talk about how ugly this habitat is. Dr. Harper mentioned, you know, snaky. We definitely hear that, but people don't like it. They say it's ugly. Who wants that ugly mess in their backyard? So we thought, well, what can we do to maybe, you know, spice it up a little bit, make it look a little bit better? So we incorporated a native wildflower mix in with this, and the thought was, and hope was, that you know, what we included in this wouldn't degrade the actual habitat, the structure that we were trying to get at itself. And so here's what we ended up with once it was all said and done. So we had all of our native weeds, we had all of the things that we wanted, the forbs, we had the grass composition, we had the bare ground we needed, we had everything. But in addition to that, we had the wildflowers coming in the mix. And what this actually did, there's a tremendous amount of different kinds of bugs, insects, things that use this, and of course that's food not only for turkey poults and quail chicks. There's a lot of small mammals, songbirds, just a variety of species that benefit from this type of habitat. So another thing that we noticed, though, that was interesting was usually about by June, going into July, there's not a lot of things going on in the WMAs where there's a lot of people there, but we noticed a lot of people coming around, and it was a little different. It wasn't your average deer hunter or person out, you know, looking for a dove hunt or something like that. We started noticing people just showing up wanting to take pictures of flowers or butterflies or whatever, or maybe they wanted to pick flowers or do something like that, which was no problem because there's millions of the things out there. So just had a different use, I guess, people coming out. And it's also interesting that a lot of the ladies would come out with their husbands, and you'd find the husband standing down by the road kicking rocks, and when she got done and came back, she informed him that when they got home that they were going to plant this in their back 40 or 50, whatever they owned. So whether they did it or not, I don't know, but, you know, they were set that this is what they wanted in their field back there. So I think it was positive. So just some of the other things, just wanted to throw in this, a lot of freebie stuff that we get. We like that. This was an Eagle Scout project. We wanted a way to get people, you know, whether it's the dove hunters back to the dove fields, or get the deer hunters over to the woods or to the food plots or whatever. We needed a kiosk that we didn't have. So this Eagle Scouts come in, built this for us. We could put up our special regulations like this, for example. We did close the quail season. That we know of, we consistently flush 1 covey of quail here on Buffalo Springs for the past few years since we started this work. And so we did close that, and all right. We also, being a graduate from the University of Tennessee, it does my heart good to use and abuse undergraduates, because I've been there and done that. And so we do utilize undergrads in the wildlife program. They come out and help us on different work. Volunteer work gives them experience, get to know people in the agency. And here they're putting in some trail markers. Another thing that we did was put in a wildlife viewing trail. Now, the purpose of this trail is not simply just a bird trail to go see birds or something like that on. It's an educational, informational trail. It's a 1.5 mile trail that goes through the entire WMA. We're in the process of working on educational stops to where when people get to a certain habitat type, there's a little placard there that says this is whatever it is, whether it's native grass or something like that, and then they can read about it, see the species associated with it, and then have a better understanding of that. And the great thing about the trail is that other than me going out and flagging where I wanted the trail to go and a little bit of spraying of some poison ivy, our local Boy Scouts came and they actually put the trail in. So, and they were tickled to death to come do it. So, and here's just another look. They came back and lined it with logs, and they enjoy coming back and doing maintenance on the trail. So I would invite anyone that would like to come anytime and go walk the trail or go look and see the different habitats and things like that. You're welcome to come. The final project that we're working on right now that I want to talk to you about is this is that area that when I showed you earlier where the barracks, where the CCC camp, where they actually lived. That's this area. So that picture was taken earlier of standing in that road looking down through there, so you can see it was grown back up in trees. What happened, there was a pine beetle kill, and there was a lot of pines in this stand, killed them. All the trees fell over, and it came back in a very thick mess of Chinese privet and blown down pines and some maple and other trees that a little less desirable than what we would like to have. So when we looked at this, we thought, we can make this better. Not that this is completely useless for habitat, it would provide cover, but we wanted to do something different here. And so what we decided to do was go in and clean this up, and use of dozers, use of chemicals, whatever it took to get rid of this. And this is an ongoing process, but so we went in and we opened it back up, and this is what it looks like. We piled everything up. When it dries good, we'll burn it. And we left any mature oaks that we could find, and with the thought that, and when I say this, we're going for a savanna type habitat effect. And again, we're not going for, we don't have the acreage to put on the ground a 1,000-acre savanna. However, we can put an example on the ground that landowners that do own a lot of land can come look at and say, oh, well, that's a neat habitat. I'd like to maybe try something like that on my property. So, and of course the trail goes right by this, and it'll be another stop on that wildlife viewing trail for them to see and learn about. We did have a little bit of the seed mix left, so we went in ahead and put very low poundage of the little blue stem with the wildflowers into that as well. And then ultimately these are borrowed pictures, so ours will be a lot better looking than this, but this is ultimately what you'll end up with. It's going to be a scattering of trees with that early successional, wildflowers, native grasses underneath in the understory, so that's what we're going for. So with that, I tried to get through. I know it's late. If anybody has any questions or needs more explanation on anything, I'll be glad to do that.
Mayor on the commission?
Are the CCC dwellings, are they still on?
The only structures left standing right now are the house I showed you, and then there's a workshop, an old generator house, and a few other buildings that just scattered around, small buildings, but none of the barracks or anything like that are left standing. There's a lot of stuff in the woods, though.
On your kiosk, do you put information about the seed blends that you planted for the public to? You said they like to go plant it.
Right. I have not done that. What my thinking was when they got to the native grass and the seed mix would come into play there to have information explaining the importance of not overseeding and the species that you use in that and exactly, not the recipe of how to do it, but just enough information to hopefully help them along, and if they need more information can contact us to get more help.
Just a quick comment. Alan, I guess it was a year ago, we came and visited your neck of the woods, and it was just fun to see the staff's enthusiasm. I mean, they lit up as they were showing the place off, and if you get the chance to go through Buffalo Springs with Scott, it's fun to watch him light up. particularly during dove season, giving you a tour of all the things that are being tried. The staff really takes a lot of pride in this, and y'all are doing a great job up there.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Scott, what is the overall management objective of Buffalo Springs?
The overall objective, when we look at the size of the WMA, we don't have definitely the size to do, or the numbers of animals for even big game management as far as deer and turkeys. We don't know the numbers there. Small game and non-game species are what we're managing for. So, and primarily early successional species is what our focus is. And there's a lot of areas there that have grown up that we can still get back, and we can knock them back, and that's our goal, is to do that. And again, if you look at at an aerial photo of what surrounds that WMA, there's a lot of farms there. There's some horse farms, but it's Granger County tomatoes. So there's a lot of tomato fields, but there's a lot of grown up fence rows and still some good rough habitat that could potentially be some good habitat if we got with the right people. But
And what percentage of Buffalo Springs is forested or wooded?
well,
Go back to your introduction slide, I think you had
yeah.
an aerial photo of that.
That one. So, and again, by forest, now this is different stages of forest. I mean, it's not all mature hardwood forest. It's forest, it's beyond, that early successional stage. So that's right. It's not openings, that's right.
And so I think that picture right there provides the best illustration that we have seen towards what is and is not habitat for bobwhite. Where all you see those trees and all, that's largely unusable, or if it is used, it is an automatic trap for Cooper's Hawks. If you have a property that is being managed, and I know Scott is not trying to do this on Buffalo Springs, but in terms of the WMA that's managed specifically for bobwhites, if you have more than, let's say perhaps, and a lot of you will be shocked at this, 20% of the property that's in woodland forest like that, there's no need to expect any change from what's going on. And that was related to my comment at Ames. Much more than 50% of Ames Plantation is in forest. And most of the open area is clear cropped. A relatively small percentage of it is in that high quality early successional habitat for bobwhites. And then if we look at a WMA on a WMA perspective and see, okay, what percentage of the WMA is forest, and then wonder why we haven't seen a response in bobwhites, it kind of becomes apparent. And so that's a big step forward to say, okay, we're going to take this WMA and it is going to be our bobwhite WMA. And as somebody mentioned, having that educational, I think it was Commissioner Ridley, having that educational message says, look, here's why we need more early successional cover. And if you're interested in bobwhites, here's where you need to go, because we're doing it right here. And while many of those openings are outstanding in terms of cover for bobwhites on this area, if you look around, it's largely a forested property. And that's that scale factor that Darrell was mentioning. I think that was a great illustration.
Thank you. And we're definitely not going to change the world with 342 acres in quail, but we can, of course, like I said, we're going to educate people and hopefully get everybody involved and maybe large scale. You can see what's around. If you could zoom back even more and see what's around, it's all open there around that. We have most of the trees there.
I appreciate your presentation on Buffalo Springs, and obviously, no matter the size of the land, there's a lot of things you can do through habitat manipulation to benefit different types of wildlife. Some areas are suited better for different things, but it's up to the landowners to decide on their own property, and as an agency, anything we do to make it better than we found it is a good thing. So I appreciate everything you said today. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Does anyone else have anything in Wildlife Management Committee today? That's it.
Thank you, Commissioner Teague. Let's move on quickly to